In war, there are many casualties, unless it's the cartoon war of G.I. Joe versus Cobra. In that case, everybody gets a parachute. This is the Mythology of G.I. Joe, the Sunbow cartoon edition. In 1982, Hasbro, suffering from low sales and losing the battle to their competitors, decided to reboot the brand that had saved them once before, G.I. Joe. This time, the action figure that invented the action figure would be smaller to match the size of Kenner's Star Wars. The famous bearded action soldier, G.I. Joe, would become a team of soldiers, all with different military specialties and absolutely no dress code. With this new action figure line, there would be many innovations, but the most innovative thing about G.I. Joe was how it was advertised. The Griffin Bacall advertising agency was brought in to get the word out. Star Wars had taught the world that story could be the greatest driver of sales for a toy brand, but there would be no G.I. Joe movie. The innovation? The story of G.I. Joe would be told in file cards, comic books, and finally, a cartoon. The Griffin Bacall agency created Sunbow, their animation production house, and in partnership with Marvel Comics, they produced a miniseries for G.I. Joe that would evolve into an ongoing series, producing 95 episodes. Coupled with the comic book, the animated series fueled the imagination of the fans and sales exploded, helping to make G.I. Joe a massive hit and changing the landscape of the action figure market. The Griffin Bacall method would become the standard for any action figure brand. If you wanted to survive in 80s action figure land, you needed to have a cartoon. And this innovation would lead to other companies like Filmation, Deke, and Rankin Bass to follow suit and create many of our favorite shows. Sunbow would go on to create some of the most iconic and inventive cartoons of the 80s, including Transformers, Jem and the Holograms, and the Lovecraftian horror show for kids and Humanoids, all which share the same universe as G.I. Joe. As with all action figure mythologies, there are several creators. Tom Griffin and Joe Bacall were the masterminds behind the Griffin Bacall advertising agency. The animation was outsourced to Toei Animation, which might explain the beautiful anime-level quality of something like the intro to the 1987 movie. Toei was the company that produced Dragon Ball, Sailor Moon, and One Piece. The Sunbow cartoons feel different than the other companies of the era. Similar to the way Looney Tunes compares to Disney, the Sunbow cartoons are edgier, weirder, and funnier than their counterparts. You might say they aren't edgy at all, but don't forget, everything is relative, and we're not talking emo kid edgy, we are talking 80s cartoon edgy. Yes, when his tank explodes, the driver jumps out and G.I. Joe gets really silly, but take Filmation for instance. She-Ra wasn't even allowed to punch her enemies, and in G.I. Joe you had scenes like this, or this. However, as some episodes were dark and weird, others were ridiculous. G.I. Joe gets weirder and goes wilder than other shows of the era, with bizarre episodes that range from social satire to Twilight Zone-style existential horror. The darker, weirder nature of the Sunbow series can be explained by the fact that they all share the same writing staff, a collection of the wildest minds of 80s cartoons. Ron Friedman was the head writer for the first two miniseries. Friedman wrote for many iconic TV shows and was the lead writer on G.I. Joe the movie. Steve Gerber developed Season 1 while Buzz Dixon stepped in for Season 2 and would have made Season 3 had it made it to production. Steve Gerber was a Marvel Comics writer who created Howard the Duck and Thundar the Barbarian, while Buzz Dixon has a list of credits so long it reads like a catalog of your childhood dreams. Transformers, Jem, Thundar, Spiral Zone, TMNT, Mr. T, My Little Pony, Conan. Flint Dille was the mastermind behind Transformers and Visionaries and wrote several episodes. There were many other writers throughout the 100 episodes, including Michael Charles Hill, who created the iconic Cold Slither, or Christy Marks, who wrote 5 episodes and also created the show Jem and the Holograms. A crew of talented voice actors were brought in, and you'll hear many of the voices spread across various Sunbow shows. The incredibly talented cast and crew created one of the greatest cartoons of the 80s. The Sunbow team was working under the limitations imposed by the fear of angry moms, worried that their sons were playing with war toys. To soften the blow, guns were replaced with lasers, and death was avoided at all costs. At the end of each show, there would be a positive message, teaching kids a moral lesson or sometimes actually useful information, like stay away from that guy.
Now we know.
And knowing is half the battle.
The story details the conflict between G.I. Joe, a highly trained special missions force, and their enemy, Cobra, a ruthless terrorist organization determined to rule the world. But the G.I. Joe of the cartoon radically differs from that of the darker, more serious comic book. For an overview of G.I. Joe that brings together the cartoon, comic book, and the action figure to replicate the way a kid thought about G.I. Joe, check out my video on the mythology of G.I. Joe. In this world, Cobra is a well-known entity, and the Cobra Commander often likes to announce his plans to the world by interrupting TV broadcasts. While this version of Cobra is far less serious than the terrorist organization created by a used car salesman from Larry Hama's comic book, this version of Cobra is no less evil. Cobra regularly keeps slaves like Selena or the giant Raymar, who is forced to fight in the arena of sport. This version of G.I. Joe blends together many genres, ranging from science fiction to fantasy to comedy, and Cobra seems to be capable of almost limitless technology, inventing devices such as the Mass device that can transport entire legions of Cobra across great distances, or the Pyramid of Darkness. Cobra has several bases all around the world. The Cobra Temple is an ancient-looking castle. However, the bases do not last very long before they are invaded and destroyed. The Cobra Mothership is a massive hovering battle station featured in the opening credits of Season 1, although a second mothership is built and once again destroyed in the episode My Favorite Things. With all their motherships getting destroyed, Cobra is inundated with money problems. As you can imagine, night ravens and terror drones can get expensive. They have resorted to drastic measures in order to fund their insane terrorist activities, including creating a telethon where they ask for donations, or more specifically, a Cobra-thon. However, their most insane fundraiser would have to be the creation of the rock band Cold Slither. Cold Slither used a device created by Destro that inserted subliminal messages into the music that brainwashed the youth of America. Their titular song was a hit and kept Cobra funded, but the entire enterprise fell apart when the Dreadnoks got tired of lip-syncing and walked off stage. This is not even close to Cobra's weirdest plan. Cobra at one point creates a TV network in order to brainwash the youth of America with their very own parody of the A-Team called the C-Team.
I pity the fool that doesn't join Cobra. I pity him.
Mr. C eventually leaves and applies to join G.I. Joe. We never see him again, so we'll assume his application is still pending. And the story revolves around Cobra's many attempts to rule the world and the many weapons invented to help them in their task. You'd think hiss tanks and night ravens and trouble bubbles would be enough, but in the Sunbow world, these are the least of Cobra's weapons. Besides, most of them can be destroyed with a single laser blast. Cobra has many other weapons that never made it into the toy line, like the giant water robots or the snake mechs, which a third-party company turned into a toy a few years ago, or the laser used to burn Cobra Commander's face into the moon, or the fatal fluffies, cute little creatures that, like Pokemon, evolve into massive horned monsters that wield whips. But the G.I. Joe team is ready for any threat. The G.I. Joe team is at first led by Duke, a fierce and brave soldier voiced by Michael Bell. He is seemingly in a relationship with Scarlet, the team's counterintelligence expert, although that makes comic book Snake Eyes sad. Scarlet, voiced by B.J. Ward, is an expert martial artist. She wields a crossbow that fires a variety of trick arrows, including flare arrows, grappling lines, and high explosive tipped arrows. Snake Eyes, voiced by, well, nobody, is the team's silent commando. He is an excellent breakdancer. His best friend is a wolf named Timber, who he rescued from a trap, and then Timber rescued him from a polar bear attack. While Snake Eyes has no voice, Timber was voiced by the great Frank Welker, who also voiced Megatron and Fred from Scooby-Doo. If you ever wondered what Snake Eyes is thinking, check out my video on that here. Stalker, voiced by Arthur Burkhart, is most often seen in a jump jetpack flying over the action. Flint is the second in command, although rank in the G.I. Joe cartoon can't easily be taken seriously. He is a courageous hero voiced by Bill Ratner. In his spare time, he wears his beret in public and drives, ironically, a red Cobra Stingray. His longtime love is Lady J, voiced by Mary McDonnell Lewis. She has the sexiest voice of any 80s cartoon character. She is a master of disguise and carries a series of javelins that have various functions. Diamond-tipped, explosive, rocket-propelled, heat-seeking, bubble-creating. She can use them as a melee weapon or hurl them with deadly accuracy. Lady J shares an ancestor with her mortal enemy, Destro.
The other one looks like me!
Quick Kick is a movie stuntman who talks in bad actor impersonations.
Got a problem, Pilgrim?
He joins the G.I. Joe team when on a location shoot for Fudgy Bars. He comes across Alpine and Bazooka and rescues them by nunchucking a couple of angry seals. Bazooka and Alpine are the wise-cracking comic duo of the series. Bazooka seems to be a bit slow, which might be why no one believes him when he sees a sea serpent. Spirit is the resident mystic shaman of the G.I. Joe team. He practices a Native American martial art that makes him good enough to match a ninja, and has healing powers. Roadblock, the team's heavy machine gunner and barbecue chef, is one of the most important characters in the series. He speaks in rhymes and is voiced by Keen Holiday.
Sucker, you are out of luck. So when it comes, you better duck.
Possibly the character most loved by the Sunbow writing staff is Shipwreck. Played by Neil Ross doing an impression of Jack Nicholson from the film The Last Detail.
Now give this man a beer.
Shipwreck's companion is Polly, a parrot voiced by Frank Welker. Who else? Polly has been known to take out a cobra or two, and the pair are constantly bickering. Shipwreck is the rare anti-hero in 80s cartoons. He is sarcastic, prone to anger, and has a tendency to hit on every woman he sees. Shipwreck loves the ladies. He finally finds love with Mara, a cobra soldier who has been genetically enhanced so she can breathe underwater. Maybe he has a gill fetish. Mara leaves Cobra, but because she needs to live underwater, they cannot be together. In one of the most harrowing episodes of the TV show, Shipwreck wakes up from a coma finding out that Doc has created a cure for Mara. She and Shipwreck are married and have a child. However, the reality is he is being held by Cobra as they are attempting to extract information from him, and the life they have built for him is a fake. Mara and his child are synthoids, and they melt right in front of his very eyes. In Season 2, a whole new cast is introduced with the miniseries Arise, Serpentor, Arise. Hawk becomes the new team leader. He is more elder statesman than Duke, but still leads the battle when necessary. Also introduced is Beachhead, voiced by William Calloway. He's a short-tempered, intense soldier who becomes a drill sergeant to the new recruits in the G.I. Joe movie. But the major addition to the team is Sergeant Slaughter. This version of Slaughter is almost superhuman, taking on legions of battle android troopers by himself. He loves to call people maggots and runs a training regiment he calls the Slaughterhouse. There are so many more, too many characters to list in this video. The G.I. Joe team has many operatives, and they often take turns as the main character of any given episode, as opposed to the comic, which is obsessed with a handful of characters, and mostly Snake Eyes. In the cartoon, any character might take the lead, as when Dusty pretends to be a traitor and is cast aside by the team, or when Lowlight saves the day by mastering his nightmarish childhood in order to defeat Dr. Mindbender, who has given himself the Freddy Krueger-like power to invade dreams. Or when Iceberg becomes a killer whale, the G.I. Joe team of the Sunbow universe is truly a team. For every great hero, you need a great villain. The Cobra Commander of the Sunbow cartoon is a far less menacing version of the Commander than the comic book version, where he is a stone-cold psycho. This Cobra Commander is whiny, impatient, incompetent, and loves to retreat.
Retreat! Retreat! Retreat!
Played by one of the most distinctive voices in 80s animation, Chris Collins, who also played Ripper as well as Starscream and the Inhumanoid Decompose. Chris Collins, also known as Chris Latta, was a stand-up comic and played this guy from the 80s masterpiece Roadhouse. He was also the original voice of Mr. Burns, but was fired for being difficult. Cobra Commander attempts insane scheme after insane scheme to rule the world. Cobra Commander's partner in crime is Destro, who invents and manufactures Cobra's many ridiculous weapons. Voiced with great malevolence by Arthur Burghardt, Destro has little signs of a Scottish accent, but the voice is iconic. However, Destro is Scottish. He comes from a long line of Destros, who, as a tribute to their ancestor who was caught selling weapons to both sides, are forced to wear an iron mask. Destro's mask moves and conforms to his face. It also has painted on eyebrows for some unknown reason. The Destro clan practices a form of human sacrifice to an elder god, a practice which Lady J almost becomes the victim of. Destro loathes Cobra Commander for his incompetence and wants Cobra for himself. He loves to screw with the Commander whenever he gets the chance. Destro's girlfriend is the Baroness. The Baroness is a master of disguise, and it is a pretty good bet that if you see a frumpy looking woman in the G.I. Joe cartoon, watch out, it's probably the hot-ass Baroness in disguise. She is voiced by Morgan Lofting. Tomax and Xamot are the executives of Extensive Enterprises, Cobra's business front. Known as the Crimson Twins, they show great acrobatic prowess. When one gets hurt, the other feels it, meaning by punching one, you're kind of punching both. It's not very helpful in a fight. They are voiced by Corey Burton and Michael Bell. Zartan, voiced by Zach Hoffman, is Cobra's other master of disguise. He uses holographic projections to change his appearance. He is a mercenary and only interested in money. He lives in the swamps and is the leader of the Dreadnoks, a biker gang that loves destruction and uses power tools as weapons. The Dreadnoks were reportedly inspired by Mad Max, Road Warrior, but the cartoon version of this Australian biker gang seems to be more inspired by This Is Spinal Tap. They are incompetent and untrustworthy, and often cause Cobra Commander's plans to fall apart. Storm Shadow is the Cobra Ninja. He has a feud with Spirit, yes, Spirit, not Snake Eyes, and sometimes Quick Kick, but despite his ability to take apart a tank with his bare hands, this version of Storm Shadow often gets his ass handed to him, unless he is wielding the magical sword Excalibur. Other notable villains include Firefly, Wild Weasel, Copperhead, and Major Blood. In the second season, new villains are introduced, including the team's mad scientist, Dr. Mindbender. Destro, Tomax, and Xamot, sick of Cobra Commander's failure, search for a new leader. Mindbender has a prophetic dream. He sees strands of DNA swirling around him, and wakes up with an inspired idea. He will make a Cobra Emperor. They rob the graves of some of the most great and terrible leaders of all time, although as I detail in my video on Serpentor, most of these are a really bad idea. He takes the DNA of Alexander the Great, Genghis Khan, Geronimo, Julius Caesar, Rasputin, and more, and even adds in the DNA of Sergeant Slaughter. However, the recipe leaves out the DNA of Sun Tzu, and the Cobra Emperor is born minus the patience necessary to lead. Serpentor, mad with power, tosses Cobra Commander aside and marches on Washington, but he is thwarted by the G.I. Joe team. The world of G.I. Joe is populated by many other characters, allies, and enemies. Honda Lou West is a trucker who gets involved with the Joes. Her truck uses a modification of the animation model for Optimus Prime. Satin is a singer who works at the Snake Club on Cobra Island. She helps Snake Eyes and Shipwreck escape and reveals she is secretly on Cobra Island to get revenge on Cobra for framing her father for a crime he did not commit. The British super spy, Agent Matthew Burke, is the James Bond of the Sunbow universe if James Bond was a giant douchebag. He works for Auntie, which might be a play on the Man from U.N.C.L.E. He teams up with G.I. Joe when the Queen needs help from the Yanks. The October Guard is the Russian equivalent of G.I. Joe, and often battles against and then with G.I. Joe, first united in fighting against a fake alien invasion, and later fighting over who gets to own Alaska. Hector Ramirez is the intrepid reporter who believes G.I. Joe is a waste of taxpayer resources. Created by Buzz Dixon as a parody of stunt reporter Geraldo Rivera, whom Buzz Dixon loathed. Hector shows up in several episodes of the G.I. Joe series. Hector is proof that G.I. Joe exists in a shared universe with the other Sunbow properties, Transformers, Gem and the Holograms, and the Inhumanoids. In fact, Hector gives a pretty great summary of all of Cobra Commander's wacky plans.
Well, let's see. There was your invasion of Washington, D.C., the giant mechanical sea serpent you unleashed on New York, the time you melted the polar ice caps, raided the Rocky Mountain chemical weapons arsenal. You created that bogus heavy metal band Cold Slither, staged the Cobra-thon, sank the USS Montana and the USS Flag, and attempted to swindle Alaska away from the United States.
Picky.
Cobra is not the only threat facing G.I. Joe. One such enemy is the Games Master, an effete billionaire of seemingly limitless resources. He captures members of G.I. Joe and Cobra in an effort to force them to play a series of deadly games. The red and blue robots used in said game are a nod to the Rock'em Sock'em Robots toy produced by Hasbro's competitor, Mattel, and bear a subtle resemblance to Optimus Prime and Shockwave. Although he prefers to use his robotic toys to fight his battles, he is abnormally massive in size, giving him incredible strength. He is psychotic and seems attached to his robotic clown assistant, Coco. It is Coco that prompts him to begin his psychotic little game, pronouncing a game where no one gets hurt as boring.
It will be fun, Coco. Just wait.
Coco prompts his master to move to a more dangerous playtime. He is defeated by G.I. Joe and Cobra, but escapes in a slingshot-launched UFO and vows vengeance, although he never returned. But possibly the most notorious and ominous of all villains is the operative they call the Viper. G.I. Joe the cartoon is full of love stories. Scarlet and Duke, Flint and Lady J, Destro and the Baroness, Shipwreck and Mara, Quick Kick and his martial artist girlfriend Amber. Often love or flirtation may lead to a betrayal of Cobra, such as in The Presence of Mine Enemies, where the Night Raven pilot, Raven, discards Cobra and hints she may join the G.I. Joe team. When Zorana on an undercover mission meets Mainframe, the two fall for each other. In the end, they cannot be together and return to their ways, but they risk everything to protect one another. In the past few years, multiverses have become standard in comic book movies, but G.I. Joe did it early. In the episode World Without End, G.I. Joe members slip into a parallel world, discovering a different timeline where Cobra has conquered America. Steeler begins this two-part episode doubting that risking his life for G.I. Joe has any value, and in the end, when he comes face to face with his own skeletal remains and discovers he is in love with the Baroness, who has become a double agent for the Resistance, he decides to stay back, joined by Clutch and Grunt, and fight the good fight forever. It's a noble effort, but frankly, if you found out you were banging the Baroness in another world, you'd probably stay back too. At the end of the Sunbow run, Cobra Commander is working on challenging Serpentor to regain his role. He creates the Coil, a cult loyal to Cobra Commander. Had there been a third season of G.I. Joe, the Coil would have played a major part. An alternate third season had been planned and would follow The Most Dangerous Man in the World, a story written by Buzz Dixon about the ideological father of Cobra. Buzz Dixon eventually released the story as a novel under the Kindle Worlds imprint, but it has since gone out of print. Buzz's idea was tossed aside in order to create G.I. Joe the movie, the story that will end the Sunbow era. The G.I. Joe movie was originally meant to go to movie theaters, and it has the most epic, gorgeously animated intro ever of anything. In this new story, a new threat emerges, and the truth about Cobra is revealed when a strange invader breaks into Cobra headquarters. She is Pythona. The sight of her strikes a memory within the Cobra Emperor. The idea for his creation did not come from the crazy mind of Dr. Mindbender. It was implanted there by Cobra La. Serpentor is the harbinger of doom for mankind, created by an ancient society called Cobra La. Cobra La is an ancient civilization that lives in the Himalayas. They use organic matter to create their weapons and unusual technology. The name Cobra La was meant to be a placeholder, a reference to Shangri-La, a fictional paradise hidden in the Himalayas described in James Hilton's 1933 novel, Lost Horizon. But the Hasbro execs loved it and decided to keep it, so you can thank them for this. They are led by Golobulus, played with glorious malevolence by Burgess Meredith. He is joined by the Nemesis Enforcer, a bat-winged creature that is the inspiration for many nightmare creatures of legend. It is here where we find out that Cobra Commander was a scientist sent out to infiltrate human society and bring the glory of Cobra La to the rest of the world. This was the true purpose of Cobra. But Cobra Commander has failed and must pay for his crimes. He is exposed to the spores of a Cobra Law bioweapon and slowly devolves into a snake form. He allies with the blinded Roadblock, and the two set out on a journey inspired by the film The Defiant Ones, where two men who hate each other are forced to work together. Cobra Law has a vision to finally bring the world to submission. The plan: they will use the stolen broadcast energy transmitter to release spores into space and release their noxious gas, dooming humanity. The plan is foiled by the Joes, led by Duke's half-brother and Team F***Up, Lieutenant Falcon, played by Don Johnson. Falcon joins the Renegades, and the new recruits Big Lob, Tunnel Rat, Law & Order, Chuckles, and Jinx. Falcon redeems himself and stops Cobra Law from infecting the world. Although the original plan was to kill Duke, the backlash to the killing of Optimus Prime forced Hasbro to nix this idea. Duke recovers, once again reassuring us that anyone who seems to die always has a parachute. Derailed by the failures of the Transformers and My Little Pony movies, G.I. Joe the movie went direct to video, ending the Sunbow era. Although we never see the end of the conflict between G.I. Joe and Cobra, we are given a clue to how it ends. In the Transformers cartoon, Cobra Commander eventually returns as Old Snake. Having lost the war against G.I. Joe, the Commander sells his services to a mob boss who wishes to steal the bodies of the Autobots. He is defeated once again and walks off into the sunset, claiming,
They simply don't make terrorists like they used to.
G.I. Joe continued, but not as a Sunbow cartoon. In a terrible decision made by Hasbro to save money, the contract for the next season of G.I. Joe was transferred over to Deke, a production company that eventually earned the nickname Do It Cheaper. In fairness to Deke, they had produced several excellent animated shows in the past, such as Cops and Mask. However, this version of G.I. Joe does not reach the quality of those other productions. Yes, they cost less to make, but it also ensured their cartoons are far less fondly remembered. It's pretty hard to find a Deke fan. The Deke show supposedly picks up where we left off, with Cobra Commander regaining his human form and getting his revenge by turning Serpentor into his pet lizard. However, the show is so tonally different it cannot be considered part of the same continuity. The Deke version of G.I. Joe loses touch with everything that made the Sunbow series special. The animation, no longer produced by Toei, looks cheap and sloppy. The writing has none of the edge or humor brought by the Sunbow team, as according to Buzz Dixon, they weren't willing to pay enough to get him to work on it. A few years later, G.I. Joe would be discontinued. Had it run its course, or is this proof that the Griffin Bacall formula was a necessity? A toy line needs a good cartoon to survive. It is probably more likely that G.I. Joe simply came to its natural end. G.I. Joe ran from 1982 to 1994, making it one of the longest running action figure lines ever, with a mythology that has evolved into many different forms. But the love for the Sunbow G.I. Joe cartoon lives on, with action figures from Super 7, and the G.I. Joe Classified series recreating iconic characters created by the cartoon, and a tribute concert to Cold Slither which premiered at the 2025 Comic-Con. The Sunbow legacy lives on. This is the mythology of G.I. Joe, Sunbow Cartoon Edition. For more action figure mythologies, subscribe, and if you are interested in exploring the UK version of G.I. Joe, where Sergeant Slaughter was called Sergeant Slammer, check out my video on the mythology of Action Force.